There was a time when human beings lived in small groups, closely connected to the land, where survival depended on awareness, cooperation, and a direct relationship with nature, and where the idea of power had not yet taken the form that later came to shape civilizations. As communities began to grow, systems were formed to organize life, and over time these systems expanded into kingdoms and kingdoms into empires, each carrying with it the ambition to create order, stability, and influence over larger territories. In their early stages, these civilizations often displayed remarkable clarity, where knowledge, governance, and culture developed in ways that supported growth and cohesion, and this allowed them to rise with strength and purpose. Yet history reveals a pattern that repeats itself with striking consistency, where the very forces that contribute to the rise of a civilization gradually begin to change in character and over time become the reasons for its decline. As power consolidates, attention begins to shift, where the focus moves from balance towards control and from understanding towards expansion. And this shift, though subtle in the beginning, begins to reshape the structure itself. Systems that were once flexible begin to harden. Leadership that once served begins to protect its own position, and the connection between power and responsibility begins to weaken. This movement does not appear as collapse in its early stages, but as a gradual change in priorities, where preservation of dominance begins to take precedence over clarity of purpose. The Roman Empire stands as one of the most well-known examples, where a system that once displayed extraordinary organization and strength slowly weakened under the weight of internal instability, economic imbalance, and the strain of maintaining an ever-expanding structure. The same pattern can be observed across other empires, where growth created complexity and complexity led to fragmentation, until the structure could no longer sustain itself. The British Empire, which extended its influence across continents and shaped large parts of the world, followed a similar path, where expansion created a system that eventually became too vast to maintain, and shifting global conditions gradually reduced its dominance. These are not isolated events, but expressions of a deeper process, where any system that grows beyond its ability to remain balanced begins to move towards decline. In the modern world, power has taken a different form, where influence is no longer limited to territory, but extends through economics, technology, military reach, and the ability to shape global systems. This form of power appears more stable, yet it carries the same underlying pattern, because concentration of influence, when not balanced by awareness, begins to create the same internal pressures that have shaped the fate of earlier civilizations. When influence becomes centralized and when systems prioritize expansion and control, the gap between power and responsibility begins to widen, and internal imbalances start to build beneath the surface. These imbalances are not always visible immediately, yet they accumulate over time, affecting economic stability, social cohesion, and the strength of institutions. At the same time, the world around such a system does not remain unchanged, because other regions begin to grow, adapt, and develop their own forms of strength, gradually reshaping the global landscape. History shows that power does not remain fixed, and that every period of dominance is followed by redistribution, where new centers of influence emerge while older ones begin to weaken. In the present moment, this shift is becoming increasingly visible, where the global balance is no longer centered in a single direction, and multiple regions are beginning to assert their presence in ways that were not seen before. If one observes carefully, the same patterns that marked earlier declines can be seen once again, where overextension, internal division, and the strain of maintaining dominance begin to create pressure within the system itself. These are not sudden events, and they do not lead to immediate collapse, yet they indicate a movement that has been seen many times before in different forms. When one studies history without attachment, it becomes clear that no empire has remained dominant indefinitely, and every structure that rises to great power eventually carries within it the conditions for its own decline. This is not a matter of opinion, but a pattern that has repeated across centuries, where expansion, control, and concentration of power gradually create internal strain that no system is able to sustain forever. In the present context, the same pattern is visible once again, where the pressures of maintaining global dominance, combined with internal divisions and structural imbalance, are steadily weakening the foundations of the current order. If this trajectory continues, it is not difficult to see where it leads.
The United States, which today stands as a dominant global power, will not remain immune to the forces that have brought down every empire before it, and over time it will move towards decline in the same way that earlier powers have done. At the same time, the shift in global balance is already underway, where countries such as China and India are rising with increasing influence, shaped by their scale, continuity, and long-term positioning, and are steadily moving towards defining the next phase of global power. This is not a distant possibility, but a process that has already begun, and what we are witnessing today is not stability, but transition. And as with every transition in history, it does not announce itself clearly at the beginning, yet it becomes undeniable when seen with attention, because the movement of rise and fall does not stop for any civilization, regardless of how powerful it appears at a given moment. When this is understood, the rise and fall of civilizations is no longer seen as a series of separate events, but as a continuous movement shaped by the way power is used, the way balance is maintained, and the way societies respond to change. And perhaps this is where a deeper clarity begins, because it shifts the question from who will dominate next to how the future will be shaped, and whether that future will learn from the patterns that history has already revealed. Civilizations will come and go, and empires will emerge and collapse, yet what remains is life on this earth, continuing its journey, taking new forms and adapting to every change that unfolds over time. In the midst of these movements, what truly matters is how we live today, because the present is the only place where our actions carry meaning and where our choices shape what follows. To recognize this is to move beyond attachment to power and dominance and to place attention on what sustains life itself, where the focus turns towards humanity, responsibility, and a deeper sense of balance. This also brings a responsibility that cannot be ignored, because the impact of human action has reached a scale where it affects not only societies, but the very condition of the planet on which all life depends. In such a context, the need to stand for humanity becomes inseparable from the need to protect the Earth, because the future of civilization is not determined by power alone, but by the ability to preserve the conditions that make life possible. And perhaps this is where the real priority lies, not in who rises or falls, but in whether we are able to live with awareness, with responsibility, and with a commitment to protect the world that sustains us.